welcome to another episode of Bridge the Channel, brought to you by the Martin Center. As always, we're coming to you from Westminster. It is finally summer, with a few clouds and a few scattered rains here and there. London is blooming, one could say. It's also crawling with tourists, but I guess that's how we like it over here. We will be doing a bit of British-focused politics today, because we have some major developments that can actually have quite an important impact in the way the UK interacts with Europe and the rest of the world down the line. Some very important political figures of recent years have now suddenly been removed or kind of disappearing from the political stage in rather unpleasant circumstances. Boris Johnson and Nicola Sturgeon. It's quite amazing to imagine that just a few years ago, these people were dominating their political scenes respectively. So a little bit of a dive into British politics with quite a bit of political gossip, which is how we like it. So on this episode of Bridge the Channel. So the absolutely huge news in Westminster over these past few weeks has been, of course, the developments surrounding Boris Johnson, who for all intents and purposes has been kicked out of the Conservative Party. He essentially resigned his position, his parliamentary seat, ahead of the publication of a report that showed that there was loads of unseemly stuff happening in Downing Street during the times of lockdown, the famous lockdown parties. And not only that, but recently, actually on the day right before the day that we're recording this, a new video emerged showing the Conservative Party activists having a big COVID party during the Christmas of 2020. Needless to say, it is both a quite important political crisis, but I would say also a big moral crisis for Westminster. For Boris Johnson, it really does seem to be the end of the road, or at least one end of his political trajectory. Of course, him leaving the party right now will create all kinds of rumors about his future political trajectory, whether he will ever return, whether he wants to stage a comeback. A lot of people think whether he would try to be a Donald Trump, trying to return to the leadership of the party if and when the party loses another election. Of course, there's not going to be a series of by-elections because quite a few of his allies have resigned the parliamentary party. But as I said, this is also a bit of a moral crisis for the Conservative Party and probably for the political class as a whole. It puts politics, and particularly this government, again in a very negative light. It creates again big decisions inside the Conservative Party, and also creates major questions about how the current government is handling this situation. The only certain thing is that Boris Johnson will be a huge shadow over the government of Rishi Sunak moving forward. What is also quite interesting is that barely 4 years before his big electoral victory, Boris Johnson has now been banished by mainstream politics. It's an amazing development to also think that his big adversary from that election, Jeremy Corbyn, has suffered more or less the same fate in the Labour Party. Over two major crises, Brexit and the pandemic, essentially Britain has seen the leadership of its two major parties change altogether. It's a pretty unrecognizable political landscape, and one that actually leaves Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer as two models of politics that are very, very different to those of Johnson and Corbyn. Whether people are willing to buy into this new model of politics moving forward in the long term, it remains to be seen. So, it wasn't only Boris Johnson, though, the dominant political figure that was removed quite unceremoniously in recent weeks. North of the border in Scotland, we also have a parallel and quite similar case for one politician who for a while was seen as the major adversary to Boris Johnson. That's Nicola Sturgeon, the ex-First Minister of Scotland and head of the Scottish National Party. It was really surprising when actually she was arrested and held by the Scottish police briefly. She was released afterwards on accusations of financial irregularities within the SNP. It's worth remembering that while she was leader, her husband was responsible for the finances of the party. It is also a major surprise because Sturgeon had for long built a reputation as one of the most capable and able and honest politicians in the British political stage. stage, and also because under her leadership, the SNP dominated Scottish politics for so long. In a way, you could say that both major polls, particularly during the Brexit crisis, Nicola Sturgeon being one of the major voices against Brexit, and Boris Johnson, of course, being the epitome, the face of Brexit, both of them are now facing rather unceremonious and kind of unseemly ends to their political career. What this means for Sturgeon personally, but also what this means more importantly for the goal of Scottish independence. It also does seem that Scottish independence, a bit with Brexit, like a bit of a mirror political project of nationalism in a way, is kind of now fading from view. Without Sturgeon, Scotland loses its major inspirational leader for its independence, and the SNP under its new leader clearly is having problems building a new coalition for independence. So essentially what we have now is England without Brexit and Scotland without the cause of Scottish independence. It's in a way, British politics on both sides of the border are looking for meaning in a world full of crisis. It remains to be seen what political forces on both sides of the border will try to fill that vacuum. So this was another episode of Bridge the Channel, another episode in our long farewell to the Brexit alignment in British politics. It will be strange trying to get used to British politics without personalities like Boris Johnson and Nicola Sturgeon, or maybe we'll have to think of British politics as operating in their long shadows for quite some time in the future. What is certain is that this is yet another episode, yet another juncture in the long process of making the UK normal again. A country with a bit more realistic propositions, a bit more realistic perceptions about its own problems, and also the way how to solve them in relationship also, or in light also of its relationship with its main neighbor, the EU. I think we're going to be talking a bit about Boris Johnson more in the future. I don't think he will be done scheming against the current government. I suppose we'll have to wait and see how the persistently bad economic outlook of the UK will affect the the fortunes of the Sunak government. As always, we will have loads of political content for you moving forward, even during the summer. Until next time, take care.